Welcome. This is the Free Radical Media Podcast. This is episode number 2, recorded during the Super Bowl of 2014. During this podcast, we talk about anarchism, the Super Bowl, and how the media has a profound influence over individuals' perception. I hope you enjoy.
And there's still Christian anarchists to this day. They're not a huge group, but I think the ideas mesh well, you know.
Right.
Your stereotypical anarchist was usually considered to be atheists, you know what I mean? It's sometimes considered to be an atheistic philosophy. I don't see that. And there's a tendency in modern anarchism to be more mystically oriented.
Right.
You know what I mean? At least in a sense.
Right.
You know, but
oh, no doubt, because I feel like anarchism, I definitely feel there are, from my experience, I've experienced two forms of anarchists. The ones that are really deep in idealism, that it doesn't mean anything, you know.
right.
And then an anarchism that's more philosophically rich and actually understands and acknowledges that there is an underlying, I wouldn't want to say purpose, but there's an underlying magic to the world.
Yeah.
You know, an underlying complexity that goes beyond our senses. The spiritual dimension, essentially.
Right. Well, I've met as many anarchists as many forms of anarchism as I've met anarchists.
I bet you've met them all.
it's interesting.
Now, what would you say? I mean, what if you had to like generalize them? How are a majority of them? I mean, what are the main groups that you would categorize them as?
At least in the Western traditions, I mean, you have the anarchist groups basically fall along a series of ideological lines, right? Anarcho-communists, for example, people who base their anarchism off of Marxist theory, and especially like Mikhail Bakunin as well. You know what I mean? That era of political philosophy.
Okay, yeah, right.
Anarcho-communism, yeah, it's focused. It's very focused on political issues primarily, and you have syndicalism, which is basically similar to anarcho-communism. It's about labor theories of value, workers, the proletariat, let's say. You have other subsets too, like green anarchism, which aren't, which only slightly diverge from, the central anarchist thought. Like green anarchism focuses heavily on the environment. Some, but not all, green anarchists are primitivists in philosophical, connotations.
Then you have the opposite of that, the techno-utopia.
Yeah, there are transhumanists who are anarchists as well, so you have the opposite of that. And then you have post-leftism, which is a rejection of traditional liberal leftist ideology in constructing anarchist philosophy, for example. Post-leftists, you have like, in certain senses, Hawking Bay, Bob Black, the Crime Think Ex-Workers Collective is considered post-leftist. I'm missing a few prominent people there, but
I mean, even Terrence McKenna considered himself an anarchist.
Yeah, it's almost surprising sometimes that a lot of people have considered themselves to be anarchists, or they haven't used the term, but they follow their fellow travelers, for example. Even like real popular, like Noam Chomsky, for example, usually doesn't use the term anarchist. He uses the term libertarian socialist, which is a really similar political philosophy. But he's considered an anarchist because of his ideas. Howard Zinn, the historian, was certainly an anarchist. Scores of writers and poets obviously have been anarchists.
Yeah.
Tolstoy and
it's almost
Tolkien.
like your mind can only go to a certain point where you realize that governance is sort of irrelevant,
right,
without denying the human spirit, because at a certain point you're like, are we either responsible creatures able to make our own choices, or we're not, that's what it boils down to. And it's like, what side of the fence are you going to subscribe to? I would much rather say that I'm capable of having a level of conscious choice over myself, rather than submitting that to some foreign institution to dictate how I live.
Right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly where it differs from, social contract theory. Which,
right.
I don't recall signing a social contract. Personally, I
think that happened when they gave you your social security card at birth.
Right. But yeah, that's the thing is, that goes back into legitimacy. Social contract theory depends on legitimacy of government. How they define legitimacy is that it is representative of the citizenry of whatever nation state, right? Well, how can you say that social contract is really justifiable when, especially in the West, 50% of people don't vote, for example, don't participate, and even then, in terms of representative democracy, it's not almost at all representative of what people's actual values or desires or needs are, right? So how exactly is that social contract valid?
No, I mean, if it was, gay marriage would be legal in all 50 states, marijuana would be legal in all 50 states, but obviously they're not doing what the people want. Every time these supposed polls come out, these numbers all show that the majority want these things, but the politics, and the same thing with the immigration. Everybody wants some immigration reform, but the Congress is just sitting around doing nothing. They're trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I mean, it's, how many times have they done it? 40 times?
40-some times.
How many times do we need to continue to do this before, finally we actually do something of value? I mean, it's absurd.
Plus, you talk about, look at the just recent State of the Union address. Obama, he comes out and he says, it's undeniable climate change is a fact, okay.
Yeah, but in the same breath he talks about natural gas.
Exactly, he's talking about natural gas, and so you can say that all you want, that, it's a fact, and he's right. The majority of scientists agree that there is a undeniable problem happening in the field of climate change, but where's the legislation, right? These people are supposed to be reacting to a problem, and instead they're really just talking about it and using it in political theater. They're not actually responding to the problem. So, again, I have to say, how precisely is the social contract that we supposedly signed to allow these people to react to the problems of our society valid if they completely ignore the problems of our society?
Right.
Because it's not economical.
Right.
That's the problem, is that they're answering to the corporations and big oil before they answer to people.
And then it makes you wonder, at some point, doesn't capitalism clash with the values of democracy? I mean, it's sort of inevitable.
Oh, absolutely. The thing is, even Adam Smith himself said that, capitalism is really kind of incompatible with anything unless there's a state, right? Because there really has to be a state for you to have capitalism, right? What we have, though, is capitalism overtaking the state, right? Capitalism is now more powerful as an ideology than democracy itself is.
I think it's more powerful worldwide.
Absolutely. It's extended into every corner of the globe, essentially, now.
Yeah.
And as an ideology, I think it just has people interact more with capitalism and corporatism and consumerism every day than they do with the ideals of democracy.
Right.
People, you're supposed to go to the polls once a year and vote, and that's when you interact with democracy, right? But you interact with corporatism, capitalism, every moment of every day in the United States.
Right.
I mean, you get text messages on your cell phone about advertisements, right? Every time you go online, there's advertisements. Every time you go anywhere, there's a screen with advertisements. You have to buy things. The only thing you can really do is go to a store where they sell you things. 2/3 of the economy is based on consumption.
Do you think that's necessary, though? Do you think, that this fascist totalitarian rule was almost served a purpose to bring us to a certain level And then once we reached a certain level, it was like we would hit the spark would go on, and we'd sort of overthrow it just because of the natural. I mean, I think you can only hit a certain level of technological innovation before people would just be like, oh, well, screw you, we don't need you no more, you're obsolete.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? So, like, because I know there's a branch where they call themselves anarcho-fascists.
Yeah.
And that's essentially their idea, right? That
Yeah.
you needed a totalitarian fascist system to sort of bring the technological apparatus to a certain point to allow for total liberation.
To allow for radical change, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and I've heard that. And that may well be true. You know, sometimes you have to reach a certain breaking point or boiling point until you can actually create an environment where radical change is possible.
Right.
That's actually kind of like the biggest issue here is how do you create an environment in which radical change is possible?
Well, I think it's coming down to how much more are people willing to take? I mean, how much more things need to be pressed upon society for people to finally stand up and say, enough is enough?
Yeah, I think we're at that boiling point, you know? Like, I think if now's the time that's going to happen, it's going to be this era, you know?
It almost feels like in the early 2000s, the early portion of this century, that a clock started ticking.
Yeah.
You know, and you know,
September 11th.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, if you wanted to pinpoint it, it would be the fallout immediately after the September 11th attacks. Because I mean, look at the reaction of government to that. I mean, it filled a vacuum that was created at the end of the Cold War. You know, throughout the 90s, it was a very different energy than it was after 9/11. Right? I mean, it's. And now it seems like there's been a reaction, you know, on all fronts. I mean, the entire world seems to be going mad, you know. I mean, look at the Occupy movement, not just in the United States but worldwide. Look at the Arab Spring, all across North Africa and the Middle East, you know.
Ukraine.
Yeah, all of Eastern Europe.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, there's a lot of civil unrest happening throughout the world, and you know, it reaches a boiling point. I mean, hell, look at Brazil. They were rioting over, what was it, a 10-cent increase in bus fare? I mean, there was other things involved in that, but that was the tipping point.
Right.
A 10-cent increase. You know, I mean,
right.
That's what happened in Brazil, but yet the things that are happening in this country, the vast majority of Americans are just sitting back saying, well, hey, you know, that's okay. I mean, is it okay? Is it really okay what's happening?
Right. I mean, you know, we live in a country where faced with, you know, the revelation that our own intelligence agencies were keeping, you know, records of our text messages, phone conversations, was met with just thunderous silence. Whereas a increase in transportation costs in Brazil was met with widespread rioting. You know what I mean? It's that shows that dichotomy between, you know, our Western values, you know, and the level of control, I think, that corporatist powers have over our society.
You know, the thing that blows my mind about that whole Patriot Act is that was instituted in 2001.
Yeah.
All the things the NSA was doing and is still doing was a part of the Patriot Act. Yet people didn't start getting angry about it and saying things until this Snowden comes out with all this information. You know, before that, it was conspiracy people saying that, oh, you know, this is what's happening under the Patriot Act. And then when it finally comes out, even people who were mocking them, saying that they were crazy, then later like, well, I mean, it's not that bad. I'd rather have the government watching and making sure we're safe than not, you know, a potential another attack. I mean, how foolish are you to think that the government is capable of knowing every single aspect of something that might happen? I mean, look at this Boston bombing thing that happened, what was it, last year? Mm-hmm. You know, that kid was posting things on his Facebook 6 months before he did it. And we couldn't figure that out?
Right.
So how much, and the NSA was running at that point, you know, what type of technology do you need to be able to figure out if somebody's going to do something? If somebody wants to do something, they're going to do it. It doesn't matter how much surveillance you have.
Where are your priorities? What are you looking at exactly?
Exactly. You know, and how exactly can you tell me that you're doing this to protect us when, in that instance, you couldn't protect us from a 19 and a 21-year-old kid?
Right.
You know, with pressure cooker bombs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean that's madness. Then it is the only thing that they can stop, like, organized multinational terrorist groups. Is that what they're focused on rather than domestic terrorism? Because it seems that domestic terrorism is a far greater threat than international terrorism.
Absolutely.
The people in Pakistan who are dying in drone strikes are, by and large, first of all, it seems by and large most of them are not affiliated with terrorist groups in any way, shape, or form. But secondly, even when they are, they generally don't have the resources to attack U.S. citizens on their soil. And even if they are involved in aiding and abetting, the Taliban in Afghanistan, in the region, against U.S. forces, well, that's a wartime situation that doesn't need to be spread into the borders of various other sovereign nations. You know what I mean? We can come up with other solutions to counteract that kind of thing, one of which is just leave Afghanistan.
Right.
Afghanistan, it's only really been free for not even 12 years in the time that we had it, then the Soviets had it.
Right.
And then it was free shortly, and then we went back in.
We have we've installed essentially a drug cartel into the government of Afghanistan. I'd say they're hardly, in many ways, better off. Now, certainly, the citizens of Afghanistan are better off in certain ways, especially women and children, right? Certainly, the quality of life for those groups is better now, right? But at the same time, having a situation of constant war in that country is not improving anyone's life there. And, certainly we haven't done very well in producing a government that is not corrupt in Afghanistan. Whether we're there or not, that government seems likely to be corrupt, So
the same thing with Iraq too.
The
Taliban has literally taken over some of the northern cities.
Al Qaeda, actually.
The Al Qaeda, yeah.
It's almost like the most effective way to liberate these countries. Instead of invading them, just give them all computers, hook them up to the internet.
Well, the best way to really just to improve the quality of life and to improve even government in countries is to invest in infrastructure, right? If you go into a country and build schools, increase literacy, and provide good first of all clean water and good roads and transportation, things sort of will work out for themselves, right? Once people are able to have access to education and to the basic necessities, that's when they can begin to think about other things.
Right, exactly. Putting that threshold before they're able to sort of flourish.
And not squeezing these countries for every dime they have is, something we could do as well. Organizations like the WTO and IMF and the World Bank are really good at going into impoverished nations and creating more poverty, and lining the pockets of various Western banking and investors.
We're definitely in an interesting time, especially what we're doing here with the whole podcasting and internet media thing. It's crazy that people like us, this is the first time in history where we truly can put our message out there to the masses, literally, and it's just that reason alone makes it a magical time. And I think more and more people are opening up to this, and there's nothing better than seeing someone like in their 70s, like the dude that runs Psychedelic Salon, Lorenzo. This guy, he's like 74 years old. This guy's more on the ball with technology and social change than I am. He's hardcore anarchist. He's he's always promoting Tor and all that stuff. The anonymous web browsing and
darknets
stuff. Super web literate, super techno literate, and big McKenna fan. Big advocate of psychedelics, and is 74 years old. Hasn't let age make him. Hasn't let age calcify his brain. He's more progressive than me.
Right.
So, and because of the internet, these people are able to exist, I think, primarily.
Yeah, sure. The internet's definitely been a medium of liberation in a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways in which it is not. Internet conglomerates and mass advertising, so on and so forth. But it's still definitely the most exciting medium in modern times. Probably the most exciting invention in the last, probably several centuries.
If you're curious,
yeah,
you have to have that curiosity,
right?
Because like you said, you'll end up wasting your time doing something ridiculous, like following a celebrity, rather than actually using it as a creative catalyst.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting how, like right now, you look, on the television, you can have YouTube on there,
Right.
and we're entering an era where television, as far as what we think of cable, is merging with the internet, and it's becoming a thing where you're going to be able to have your internet channels on the same television as your basic cable channels, which that just gives so much more option to people. To sit there on your television and watch a YouTube video, and then, in the same, right after that, then watch some major network or another cable channel, right after that, and to be able to just fluidly move in between those things. It allows for such freedom that we've never had. Everything is at our fingertips now.
It is.
That's what's so amazing about technology, is that anything you want to watch, anything you want to read, anything is right at your fingertips, and that's so crazy. We've never had this amount of technology at our fingertips ever in our entire existence as humans.
Especially as individuals, you know what I mean? Like, just individual people have never had such a great access to information in human history. Unless you want to say that in the time of prehistory, when we all shared information, kind of freely amongst one another, because there wasn't much information, there were just stories.
Right.
But yeah, currently we have the most access to just a crazy volume of information, and not just in just terms of pure information, just art, literature, culture. You know what I mean? More access to other cultures. You can call someone on the other side of the world, or video chat with someone on the other side of the world in real time.
A melding together of cultures.
Right.
Cultures coming together and forming like a meta culture. Like I was watching, after you guys left last night, I was watching more of those videos by Eric Davis. And that's where he was talking about, if you go anywhere in the world, whether it be India, Germany, Brazil, wherever, the psychedelic scene is always the same. And he's like, you really can't say that for about many other scenes.
It's true.
There's usually a pretty distinct difference, because if you go to the psychedelic scene anywhere else in the world, and he's like, I'm not saying the psychedelic scene's like the epitome of human culture.
Yeah.
He's like, but it's strange how that scene has sort of a certain resonance to it that a lot of other scenes don't have.
Yeah.
And I think that's eventually what's going to end up happening. We're going to create a sort of collaborative culture,
I like that term, collaborative culture.
And we really had the opportunity to, because I think with the internet and this connectivity, it's allowing us to realize how much similarities we have with everyone around the world. For so long, it was this idea of differences. And I mean, it really all stems back to colonialism in Europe, and how Europeans tried to distinguish themselves from everywhere they went in and conquered. When in reality, all of our mythos, all of our histories are very similar in core aspects of what we believe, what we practice, what we value. And the more we realize that, when we see differences in our society, then we just say, well, it's just a matter of opinion. But the core beliefs that we have are all the same, and we can build on that. We can build on having a commonality of core ideas, and it's okay for people to have difference of opinion on things. But when the core beliefs are all the same, then you can build a society off of that. You can build a world society off of that.
Right.
And hopefully, stop a lot of the violence and a lot of the anger, because a lot of these wars that are being waged, they're being waged on minuscule things that in 100 years we're going to look at and think, man, that was a really stupid war. There was so many people who were killed for no reason, for just a difference in opinion on something that doesn't even matter.
And it's almost as if you people that are in any way, shape, or form oriented towards an alternative viewpoint, it seems to be like the common knowledge that things have to change.
Yeah.
That there has to be a massive change. In which direction, who knows? But at least we're at the point now where we can honestly say, okay, things aren't going right. The right isn't happy, the left isn't happy, everyone in between pretty much obviously knows that's bullshit.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And it's interesting that all this gets, it all gets tied back to these ideas that we talk about are considered anarchist ideas. And I mean, that's just, the word in society gets stigmatized so much. And
it gets conflated with terms like chaos,
Right.
I actually have a old pamphlet called The Anarchist Beast, and it kind of details like down through history anarchists being like stigmatized or oppressed, and even the caricatures, you know what I mean? Like in the early part of the 20th century, a lot of the anarchists were coming in from Eastern Europe, so they had these caricatures in the papers of these, stereotypical Eastern Europeans with these big beards, right, holding a bomb in their hand, and like just wearing like all these weird black gypsy-like clothing, and yeah, it's really
hasn't changed much, really.
It really hasn't. Now, just covered in black. You're usually not
Mohawk,
holding the big cartoon
rock,
bomb, But but yeah, go on. It's definitely.
no, I mean, it's an interesting how that term has been used to label people. These ideas, these thoughts. I mean, if you really take a step back and you just listen to the terminology and the philosophy behind these ideas, you realize that these are very coherent, logical, rational thoughts. These are ideas that people, the people who are projecting these ideas, the most of them, there are extreme people, but there's extreme people in everything. There's extreme people in Republicans and Democrats and every single aspect of labels that we use in society. But, that the average anarchist is a very down-to-earth, realistic person who looks at society by taking a step back and saying, there are obvious problems, there are obvious things that need to be addressed. Let's have an open conversation about this to see what we can do. Yeah. And let's realize that there are certain things that we're doing that aren't working. Let's admit our failures, and let's try and move forward before we end up doing something that ultimately, could potentially really screw up society. Really, when a lot of the ideas with anarchism, they say, you got to tear down the societal structures. But do you really have to burn down the house to make toast? You just take the structure that you have and you tweak it and you make it better.
Exactly.
Because there's a lot of good things that we have created in society that we can build off of, and we can make society better.
To use a metaphor from nature, be mycelium. Mimic a mycelium network. Mycelium grows on dead trees, on dead matter, and forms a network and is able to thrive off the decay.
Right.
So we could do the same thing. And
it then creates a new life. A lot of the trees in plant life grows off of that mycelium decay.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think that these ideas can be used in a transformative nature, right? And I think a lot of people are ready for a transformation in government and society, in terms of our daily lives, even our cultures. That we do have a very rich history as human beings, and a very rich sense of cooperation with one another, and we can preserve that while still transforming the things that are not working in society into something new. Right. We can certainly sweep away all the dross and unnecessary necessary things. Mostly I'm talking about just oppression and coercion. These things aren't necessary in human relations. It's not necessary for there to be coercive factors to get people to do the right thing. You know, and I think that's kind of gets wrapped into the the myth of modern government, that well, you need Big Brother there to keep you from being this horrible thing that you are. That human beings are just these fundamentally wicked creatures, right? And I don't think that's true.
I think that gets stemmed a lot from Freudian ideology.
Sure.
And that's one of the biggest problems. You know, people aren't savages the way they get stemmed to be. I mean, you know, without a hierarchy of government, we're not going to just fall into a perpetual state of chaos. Right. I mean, we'll become more communal. The communities will take care of themselves. You know, we'll be sustainable, and we can create a network between communities. You know, I mean, you can just think of the states. You know, you have different states do different things. Within our state, we have commerce that happen in between the U.S. And really, when you think of like the large scale of things, if we really move towards a world communal idea of living, because there's certain parts of the world who are able to do certain things better. There's certain parts of the world that have certain resources that we don't have. So when you look at the idea of of a trade organization, you can have an entity that then just markets between all these different countries of what you're doing, what you're producing, what this country needs, what this country needs, what this country is producing, what this country has more of, what this country has less of, and then you just intermingle and you trade between each other, and it doesn't fall into this idea of, well, let's see where the demand is, and let's create less of a supply,
and that can
so that we
go
can
down
profit.
to the individual level too. You know, individual to individual.
Sure, absolutely. You know, and when you get into those kinds of things, I mean, there are all kinds of ways we could structure these communities. You know, the thing is, I think that what we can all agree on, and what I honestly think most people agree on now, deep down at least, is that the way that we conduct these things now is not the proper way to be doing it.
Oh, exactly.
Right? Especially in terms of, you have these trade organizations that are motivated by capital, right? And capital seems to just infect everything with this sense of greed and competitiveness, right? And capitalism itself it almost is designed to shuffle resources to a small group, right? Who are then supposedly going to disperse them to everyone else. Well, we've seen that has never happened in an equitable manner.
Right.
You know, it just doesn't happen. So the question then becomes, well, how do we do this more efficiently? And I think I don't think that's really a radical idea. How can we do this more efficiently, better, to be able to reach more people? I mean, those seem like logical, rational thoughts to me.
It absolutely, yeah, and you can see that with Bitcoin. You know, Bitcoin in a lot of ways, to me, it's far from perfect. There's a lot of flaws to Bitcoin, but it's better than what we have now.
Yeah. And
it's almost like a transition, you know, because I feel like if we were to transition to a society that didn't use capital in some way, shape, or form, it would I feel like it'd be too abrupt of a change, and I feel like people wouldn't be able to adapt.
Right.
But if people were to transition through a medium like Bitcoin and then eventually end up somewhere like that, I think that's the most surefire, logical way for that to happen on a practical level, on a pragmatic level.
I think that's how they get away with that narrative of, well, this is the only way to do it and anything else will be chaos, right? Because if you do an abrupt, let's say tonight at midnight, all the governments around the world fall and all the currencies are destroyed, right?
Right.
Well, there will be a lot of strife and chaos and violence in that immediate time because the things people depend on won't be there anymore. Right? So there will be a power vacuum, and there will be a lot of conflicting ideologies. They're trying to fill that void, right? What you need to do, I think, is to create the potential for radical revolutionary consciousness and thought processes, and move the existing structures and pull down existing structures piece by piece in order to have a smooth transition into something that's transformative, and and better and new.
Right.
It's actually kind of funny. We were talking about earlier when you were saying about these ideas, you know, about doing things better, about moving product better and resources better. I mean, isn't that really the core idea of capitalism? Isn't, you know, being as efficient as possible?
Yeah, as a solid economic theory, like on paper, that is what it's supposed to be about.
It's kind of interesting too. I don't know what the figure is, but the amount of food that is wasted in the U.S. per year. You know, we have such a poor way of moving produce in this country that so much of the product gets thrown away. I can remember when I was working in a restaurant, the amount of food that was thrown away. I mean, it was just absurd.
Like how anti-efficient it is.
Right.
It's like the opposite now. You know? I mean, it thrives on anti-efficiency.
Capitalism inherently creates waste.
Right.
You know, in my opinion. Especially, you know, you look at grocery stores, they take their outdated products, they throw them in the dumpster, and then they put a lock on the dumpster, right?
Yeah.
Because God forbid someone who's hungry should be able to eat a meal without using the capitalist system, right?
In their excuses, they say, oh, well, they could sue us if they get sick. I can't think. Now, I guess maybe in this society, maybe we have created this situation, but I'm sorry, if I'm hungry and I eat some food and I get a little sick after, I'm not going to complain because that food got me to the point of being able to be sick. You know, I may have died if I didn't eat that food.
Right.
If I got a little sick afterwards, I'm going to be okay with that because at least I was able to live to see that sickness. And I mean, the thing of it is a lot of that food that gets thrown away, especially the packaged stuff, the expiration date and that stuff doesn't expire on the date that's posted on it.
Exactly.
It lasts a few more weeks past that.
Yeah.
So if it's at the expiration date, then do a food bank. Have a somewhere inside of your company where homeless people and people who are down now can come and eat the food, and you know no one's gonna get sick from that. If it's the day that it expires, no one's going to get sick because it doesn't really expire on the day because the amount of preservatives that are put into this stuff.
Right. Exactly. You know, it's your food is going to be safe.
Yeah.
You know, and especially, you know, look, most food is pretty safe if you treat it right and you know, produce it correctly and you cook it properly. You know what I mean? It's not that big of a deal, and there's a huge amount of perfectly good food that gets thrown away every year in, you know, all across the world, just because, you know, they set an arbitrary date and say, well, hey, this is when it's spoiled, then you have to throw it out.
Yeah.
Nobody can consume it.
And it's like, why not? I mean, why can't they just make some sort of law that says, well, if you go and eat food out of a dumpster, eat at your own risk?
Yeah,
you know?
right. Yeah, you know,
why,
yeah, true.
I mean, I just feel like the reason behind that is it would make it too efficient, you know? And somebody somewhere is making money off the fact that we're throwing that food away.
Well, absolutely. I mean, certainly garbage handlers, garbage carriers, companies are. But I think the idea really is it's not their defense is that somebody's going to sue them. But the reality is they don't want you to eat that food unless you're paying for it.
Right.
Because if people just start going around the back of the grocery store and getting food every day, that cuts into the bottom line of the grocery store, right? They don't want that. I mean, that's why the grocery stores put, they put everything into a compactor instead of putting it in a dumpster, or they just lock the dumpster, you know? I've spent large sections of my life where I've gone and gotten food out of dumpsters, right? Because most of it's perfectly good. You know, and why should I go and pay this company an exorbitant price for the food that they're throwing away, right? So, I think a lot of people have that attitude, and stores are terrified of that attitude, that someone might take their initiative to not purchase these things, right? Because if everyone decided tomorrow, I don't want to buy anything from grocery stores anymore, I'm going to find another source of food, well, that's a big problem for capitalism in general, and certainly for the grocery chains.
Absolutely, it's such a delicate house of cards. It really is. When you look at the dynamics of it. But I was thinking, take a break.
Yeah.
Watch the Super Bowl halftime show.
Oh yeah.
Catch that.
Yeah, that's cool. What's
We just watched the Super Bowl with Bruno Mars and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Thought it was pretty weird. Don't know what I think about Bruno Mars. Don't know what I think about. I mean, if you're gonna have the Chili Peppers on, have them play more than half a song. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was kind of a drag.
Like, I don't know.
But yeah, it's Super Bowl Sunday. It's the high holy day of America here.
Right.
On my way over here today, I actually I haven't told you guys this story. I was real early leaving today to come here, and I stopped. I grabbed something to eat. I ran a couple errands, and I walked into this sports bar, right? Kill some time. And it's one of those sports bars connected to a shopping mall, right? So already, you're kind of, what you're walking into, right? I sit down, I order a beer, and it was right in time for the Star Spangled Banner, right? So I'm in this environment. There's screens just everywhere, screens, up on the wall. People are playing these bar games on screens. It's just this very surreal kind of situation. And I look up, and there's just this color guard carrying a flag, and they start singing the Star Spangled Banner, and toward the end of it, these drunk guys in the back start screaming USA, USA, USA in a bar, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just this whole nationalistic feel to this Super Bowl championship, you know what I mean? It's like this very strange feeling. I just finished my drink, I left, I came here, but those images like stuck in my mind, like this contest is so tied up with patriotism and nationalism and definitely specifically corporatism and advertising, right? So I mean, what do you guys think about the Super Bowl?
Well, in regards to that, it's like I certainly feel a disconnect. I certainly feel like, number one, I don't really watch sports. I mean, I maybe watch a little bit of mixed martial arts, and follow that to a certain degree, but mainstream sports I really don't follow. Not that there's anything wrong with following it,
right?
But the whole spectacle of the Super Bowl, I just thoroughly don't resonate with at all. Everything from the commercials to the pop culture it promotes to the musical acts, I just don't jive with it. There was a time, maybe about 5 to 10 years ago, where I would, might get some decent enjoyment out of it. But the older I get and the more absurd I see our culture is, I totally see, the spectacle as it is, as a form to sort of distract us from the real problems that should be on our minds. And that's not to say we shouldn't have fun here and there. But I feel like it's perpetuating something that I haven't really connected with in quite some time.
It's bred in circuses, right? I mean,
right.
I often associate that, especially this year, with the amount of buildup that happened with the Super Bowl. It's almost sort of like the Christmas season. I mean, Christmas starts before Thanksgiving at this point, and in the Super Bowl, it was like, from the moment of the championship games 2 weeks ago, I mean, every single station you put on, there's some reference to the Super Bowl. When you go on the internet and you go on a website, there's some article about the Super Bowl. And, it's like, man, I mean, is there nothing else to talk about for these 2 weeks? Is there nothing else happening in the world worthwhile? Yeah. These are the main story every single day is something about a game that's going to happen. A game that's going to happen 2 weeks, 10 days in the future. I mean,
right.
It's amazing to me. And it's the same thing with Christmas. I mean, we build all this up to one single day, one single moment, and the moment never lives up to the hype.
Right.
I mean, look at the game right now. It's it's a blowout.
I mean, When we last checked in with the score of the game here, where we are, it was 29-0 Seahawks. And I was just thinking, I was commenting earlier. You pay whatever crazy amount of money it is for tickets to the Super Bowl, right? and you're sitting there, it's the third quarter, and it's 29-0, and that's usually when you'd be like, well, this game is over, I'm just going to go home. You know what I mean? But it's the Super Bowl, and you spent all this money, and now you have to fight traffic out of Jersey, you know, after watching this game. I don't know. It just, the entire thing just seems kind of ludicrous, especially when you look at this consumerist aspect of it, you know. I mean, basically, they hype it up so much to get you to watch the commercials that they spend so much on, you know?
Yeah.
Isn't that really the point of the Super Bowl, is the commercials?
And a lot of the times, yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that, you know, will ask me, "Oh, do you watch it for the game or the commercials?" And it's like, why would you watch a football game to watch commercials?
Exactly.
No matter how theatrical they are, it's a commercial, you know? I mean,
why am I watching something to engage with advertising?
Right.
You know?
Right. Why am I glorifying that as an art form, in other words?
Right.
You know?
And look, I've seen advertisements, you know, a lot of people get into advertising because they want to do something artistic, and advertising, they figure they'll make money. I get it, you know? I understand that, and I'm not questioning your choice for doing that, right? But at the same time, that's not pure art. It's something that's connected to the capitalist system, which is, you know, driven on making people do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do, purchase products that they wouldn't ordinarily purchase, and this whole spectacle around it is just ludicrous. Advertising just isn't appealing to me, you know.
Right. I mean, I mean, it might be just a personal issue, but in my view, it most certainly cheapens down the art itself when you have a corporate logo attached to it.
Right. The Pepsi halftime show kind of, you know, that kind of puts a damper on me enjoying the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Bruno Mars, was it?
Bruno Mars.
And you know, seeing just a big Pepsi logo all over it. And, you know.
I just think it's amazing, you know, these people who are creating these commercials, you know, these are extremely talented individuals, and you know, they're wasting their talents on these corporate models to sell these products for these corporations. And the ironic thing is, if these people tried to do this by themselves, you know, if they tried to be the quote-unquote starving artist, they would be the starving artist, because their product would never be seen in the mainstream the way it's being seen on this national stage like this. And it's kind of a double-edged sword when you look at it, because, you know, okay, you want to be artistic. Well, you can be artistic if you work for our company, but then you can also be artistic and starve. At least working for us, you're going to make money. And it has that sort of connotation to it in the corporate world, where they're saying, hey, we're the ones that got the money. You know, you come work for us, and you'll make a decent living, but, I mean, at what cost?
Well, exactly. That's that kind of idea of compromise just fills our society, I think. You know, they always sidle up to you and say, well, you're never going to get anything done unless you work within these bounds, you know, you need this money, and you need to follow by some of these rules to be able to change anything. And that attitude is what makes things never change, right? You know, imagine, you know, as a radical outlook, imagine communities where there isn't any advertising, where people are free to go and fill those voids where the advertising is with their own self-produced art. There were towns in Brazil that have done this, who have banned advertising, and then local artists just came and painted new things on the billboards, or they used them to hang bromeliads, you know, and to change all the advertising spaces into community art spaces. And that idea is really beautiful, because, you know, rather than being surrounded by advertising, we could be surrounded by our own artistic expression all the time. And isn't that more appealing?
It definitely has a beauty to it, and in a more natural rawness of human emotion and human thought, and in that, you know, spontaneity of artistic creation. And I think inside of the corporations, you know, I have to wonder if these people who are working for these corporations, creating these ads, you know, they have to answer to the corporate model. They have to answer to what is quote-unquote politically correct. Yeah. So I think that their creativity is being stifled to a large degree inside of the corporate model, and what it is that they're actually being able to put out there because of possible repercussion inside of society if someone deems something to be not kosher or not politically correct.
Right. And I mean, I definitely think there's something to be said about perverting the actual art or the actual creative element when you detach the artist's intention and have him trade it for some institution's intention instead. I think when the artist is divorced from that creative impulse, it definitely makes a sort of significant perversion on the actual art form. So yeah, I obviously wholeheartedly agree. You know, the whole notion of the Super Bowl just as a way to generate capital is just something I definitely don't subscribe to and haven't for some time.
Right. You know, it's the society, the spectacle, you know, the whole ancient... And obviously this thing has ancient Roman gladiatorial connotations, right? I mean, they even use Roman numerals to number the things, you know, bred in circuses. And I remember, Jay, you said something to me a couple days ago when we were talking about the Super Bowl, about the Occupy movement and how people on any given Sunday, how many people are in stadiums and so on and so forth, about people not being able to engage with issues that actually concern them, but being able to engage with like professional football and spectacles like this. Can you talk about that for a second?
Oh yeah, no, you know, it's funny because, you know, on any given Sunday within the NFL you have 32 teams, and typically there's 15 games going on. So you look at that and you figure the average amount of people on any given Sunday in seats in a stadium is roughly about 1 million people. So with 1 million people per week like that, you know, you have 1 million people who have paid to go to an event like that. They're paying to buy into consumerism and into a blood sport, when in the same respect, you know, when you look a few years ago with the crash of Wall Street and then this Occupy movement, I don't know what the exact number was for the total people involved in Occupy, but I can almost guarantee in a 17-week season of the NFL, you figure if there's 1 million people per week, that's 17 million people. Now I'm sure, you know, there's obviously an overlap of people who have season tickets in that, but let's say that 10 million people, 10 million different people in that entire year, I can guarantee you that there wasn't 10 million people in the Occupy movement. And this is something that affects every single person in this country, every single person worldwide. You know, people lost tons of money. They lost their entire life savings because of the things that happened on Wall Street. But yet, people are willing to spend their hard-earned money to go and watch a sporting event, and they're not willing to go and stand for free and talk and to attack the issues that have caused them to lose the money that they have. That's amazing to me. And it's not even just the NFL, it's all sporting events. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying that you shouldn't go and enjoy a sporting event, but
exactly,
if you can't go and support issues that are of importance to society, you know, if you are more willing to go to a sporting event and completely disregard of movement of socio-political issues, I mean, that really speaks to where society is in its conditioned state, to believe that, you know, okay, well, this sporting event is a way for me to forget about the problems I have. Well, why don't you take those 3 hours of that sporting event to sit in silence and contemplate why your life is the way it is, why you feel miserable, why you feel to have a need to escape from your day-to-day life, and then maybe you can find ways to make your life better. But, you know, I mean, it just blows my mind the amount of people that will just willingly go to these events, but then in that same merit, in something that is really a sociological issue, you know, you get maybe a couple 100,000, if that. I mean, honestly, the Occupy movement was probably one of the largest movements in America we've seen in quite some time, since probably the 60s.
Yeah, at least it's at the very least since the late 90s, early 2000s with the global justice movement, you know, the anti-globalization movement it's often called. It's the most important protest movement since then, and probably the most important since the 60s, or the most widely participated in since the 60s, I should say.
I mean, they say the Million Man March, you know, in the civil rights movement. Now, I don't know if there was actually 1 million people there.
Yeah, I don't have the figure in front of me. Yeah.
You know, even if there was, let's say if there was, you know, that was just for one event, and you know, how often do we reach that type of number? And that was for an event that was a very pivotal. You know, the civil rights movement is what allowed the later '60s to happen.
Yeah,
If the civil rights movement didn't happen, those hippies in the '60s, in the late '60s, that wouldn't have happened. So, you know, and you talk to any of those people from the late '60s, they'll say, you know, hey, you know, we just caught on the tail end of the wave of the civil rights movement.
So that's exactly true. Yeah. You know, so but yeah, and then you think about the millions of people who engage with like sporting events or even just regular television on a day-to-day basis, but don't go out and participate in any kind of organizing in their communities. I think that's telling. You know, I think it's really telling on the degree to which, you know, this spectacle is placed upon us. You know, and kind of lulls us into a false sense of security in a lot of ways. You know, and the Super Bowl is basically the pinnacle of that. I mean, this is the biggest sporting event of the year. It's one of the biggest television events of the year. Quote unquote events, if you can talk about things on TV being an event, you know. But you know, and plus, you know, it costs so much for, you know, the NFL is subsidized. You know, the stadiums are subsidized by taxpayer money, and you know, all the infrastructure that has to go into having an event that size costs. You know, well, it costs New Jersey money. You know, I mean, it's there's a lot of issues here.
It really is, you know, and that's the thing is that, you know, you look at all the money that goes into these things, and a lot of it is coming out of taxpayer money, especially with the stadiums, and you know, they had to build a road in New Jersey for the Super Bowl,
right?
To help to divert traffic. You know, what other type of event causes that? You know, when do we randomly have to create an entirely new highway just for one single event on one single day?
Right, exactly.
I mean, okay, now you can say, well, I mean, that momentarily caused a job for, you know, a month or two.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but look at the money that went into building that.
Right.
And then later having to destroy that, because you're not just going to have that road sitting there because it's only serving one finite purpose. So what is the point?
You know, the point of it is it's just like, you know, capitalist busy work. You know, we create a contract to sell to a company, right? And the company, you know, is then able to line their pockets doing this work, you know, and it shuffles money around, and, you know, at the top of the capitalist economy. You know, is all it is. I mean, you having an event that big in an area only benefits, I mean, certainly, okay, it benefits some local businesses from people going to eat in restaurants and so on and so forth, right? But that's the big economic driver. But that, you know, that's what it is, an economic driver. You know, and the NFL, at the end of the day, are the ones who are going to be making the majority of this money.
Oh,
you know, you know, and the players, of course, you know, I mean, we can't forget the fact that these guys are millionaires playing this sport on this field, even though they're not getting anywhere near the share that the NFL is.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, it really is so detached. It's so detached from reality. It's so detached from the economic reality. It's so detached from an artistic reality.
Yeah.
I mean, just that, these athletes, how much do they really care? I mean, they're already multimillionaires. You know, I mean, it's just such a. It really is a distraction in every sense of the word, because it has nothing to do with the real issues, and it promotes these values that have pretty much steered us in this direction since the beginning. Although I want to emphasize, I'm not against having fun. I'm not against throwing a good party. I'm not against celebration in general.
Yeah.
But the way in which this is focused and expressed in this capitalistic fashion is what I primarily disagree with.
I'm definitely not against especially big cultural events, right? You know, I'm not against having a big shared experience as a group of people. You know, I mean, you can go back to like, you know, I mean, look at Woodstock as a cultural icon, right? I mean, that's an example of a big changing cultural experience that was shared by many people and is still continued to be shared through, you know, just the, you know, the mythos of Woodstock, let's say. You know, but the Super Bowl isn't that. You know, the Super Bowl is this artificial narrative, you know what I mean? This artificial example of a shared experience. Because really they're just sharing the experience with you to sell you things. And that's not like a genuine shared experience to me. It's not like a cultural thing to me. I don't think it's as authentic as, you know, going to, you know, some kind of like arts festival, or honestly, I don't think it's as authentic as just going to the park and throwing the football around with friends and family. I think that's probably a better, more meaningful experience than watching the Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
No, I think that's true. You know, you touched on Woodstock. You know, Woodstock, it had a meaning behind it, not intentionally, but through the mythos of Woodstock and through the ideologies of that time, it promoted an idea. Now, the Super Bowl today doesn't promote an idea. It promotes an idea of consumerism. And, you know, the thing about it is genuineness. You know, if there's no genuineness to an event, it becomes an artificial idea.
Right.
And you can't really connect with it on the intimate level. You know, I mean, the funny thing about Woodstock is here we're referencing Woodstock, and Woodstock happened, you know, 50 years ago, 55 years ago. You know, and I mean, that's absurd to think about that, because inside of that, was it 55?
Woodstock was in 69, so that would be...
Yeah, it would be 55 years at this point, yeah. So 55 years ago, you have Woodstock. You know, and the thing of it is that here we are referencing Woodstock. I mean, none of us were alive during Woodstock.
Yeah, absolutely,
But yet this is still an event that we talk about. Now, in 55 years, are we going to be talking about this Super Bowl? I highly doubt it.
I would be very surprised. And in fact, I mean, the Super Bowl, I mean, this is Super Bowl 48. I'd be prepared to say that it might very well not be around as a thing in 55 years. You know, I mean, it's kind of, I think it's an ephemeral thing. You know, I think it only really exists as long as they can use it to sell things. You know, I mean, this is not a timeless event, let's say. You know, I really don't think it is.
I mean, yeah, I mean, even just speaking for myself, I know, and I've talked to other people too, that just have zero interest in the Super Bowl. And these were people that at one time did have an interest in it, but they've just woken up to reality and realized that it really is just that. It's something that wasn't helping or progressing their life in any way, shape, or form, something they honestly didn't really even enjoy. So they opted out of it and no longer participate in it. And that's really what it's all about.
I just want to make a quick aside. It's actually been 45 years since Woodstock, because I know there's going to be people who are going to mention that it's been 45 years. But still, 45 years. I mean, that's a long time. You know, to still be referencing an event. You know, one single day event.
No, it is absolutely, yeah.
You know, I mean, and that's really the point of it, is that, you know, we build up these events, you know, in today's society as this big thing, as this big deal, and we keep talking about, we talk about, and rarely does the event ever live up to the hype. You know, I don't know if back when Woodstock was happening, if it was hyped up, but I really doubt it was. Yeah, I really can't see it being hyped up for months on end before it happened.
And certainly it wasn't in, you know, your mainstream media. You know what I mean? And it's not like the kind of thing, obviously, if Woodstock happened tomorrow, there would have been months of Twitter and YouTube and social media things about it. There would have been this huge, sickening hype, you know? But this was something even then that seemed kind of special. I mean, people hitchhiked from, you know, California to rural New York to go see this festival, right? And there were, like, you know, very interesting things that happened with Woodstock. I mean, look at, you know, the first day or whatever, they cut down the the barriers around it to let everyone in for free, right? So at a certain point, the organizers said, well, okay, it's a free festival now because everybody's just coming in for free anyway. There was a group of people from New York who were supposedly, like, cut down all the first barriers or whatever. The story might be apocryphal, but there were a group of activists called Up Against the Wall Motherfuckers. That's what they were called, right? In New York City. They described themselves as a street gang with analysis. And they went to Woodstock and cut down the barriers to let everybody in for free, you know? And that's what made it, you know, this weird special thing, you know, like 3 days of peace, love, and music. It was all free, you know? And that kind of like defined, I guess, what was in people's minds at that time in what was then called the counterculture, you know?
Was Woodstock, I mean, how many music festivals of that nature were around prior to Woodstock? Was Woodstock, could you consider it a first in that whole...
I think there were other music festivals like Monterey Pop and etc.
Right.
And I think there were other free shows, places, and free concerts, but it's the first one on that scale, and it was the first one to really reach that level of cultural, wow, look
on
at
that
this.
magnitude, right?
You know, there's two major festivals during the 60s that are thought of now. That's Woodstock, and that's Altamont. You know, which is, you know, the death of the counterculture, right? You know, as they usually describe it.
That was the one? Was
The
that the one? The
Stones.
Rolling Stones, yeah.
Yeah.
And they had
The kid got
the
stabbed
Hells
to death by
Angels.
the Hells Angels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that. In retrospect, that was a bad idea to have the Hells Angels being in security.
No, yeah, especially then. Nowadays, we kind of think of the Hells Angels, and this isn't really usually true. Some are, you know, but a lot of Hells Angels or guys with Hells Angel stuff on are like these accountants who like bought a Harley, you know, and joined their latest chapter of the Angels and go on bike runs on the weekend and donate toys to Toys for Tots and, you know, that kind of thing. The Hells Angels were not that in the 60s.
No.
You know,
No, they were a legitimate biker gang.
yeah.
Not the type of people you want running security for a bunch of stoner hippie kids. That doesn't really bode well together.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's not it's not the best thing to do. It would be like hiring the Crips to do security at Burning Man. You know, it would be. Yeah.
Which, you know, honestly, Burning Man has become sort of a corporatized event as well, too.
It gets
It's
a
kinda
little
lost,
bit more and more like that, yeah.
Bonnaroo as well. Especially Lollapalooza. God, Lollapalooza. I've been to Lollapalooza 4 different times, and every single year,
Yeah.
it just gets more and more. Just, oh, man.
I mean, Bonnaroo and Lollapalooza, no doubt. Burning Man is still, I think, for the most part, they've really kind of kept the corporations out, but it definitely seems like it's become at least from what I've read and what I've heard, that there is a sense of people, for example, I think like P. Diddy went there last year and bought this huge, or set up this huge compound, and you know, it's like the things that we're trying to escape as far as economic disparity sort of leaking into this platform that usually was non-existent. So
Right.
yeah, in that respect, unfortunately, it seems to have gone in that direction in some ways.
Yeah, actually, I mean, that kind of reminded me of, I think we all read this interview with Chuck Palahniuk, and he kind of discussed Burning Man in specific and events like that in this interview, and he was talking a lot about, you know, like what he called liminal events, you know, special events like that, and how Burning Man started from like the Cacophony Society, which he was a part of in Portland and California, who were doing these events, participatory events in public, in society, right, in order to kind of break the barrier of, you know, what is a situation, what is an event, you know, what is go beyond the boundaries of what you would normally think in society of what's scripted and what's unscripted in life, right? And what art is art something you just passively experience or something you're engaged with, right? That's how Burning Man started, is this big festival of people who are engaging with ideas, engaging with art, actively and participatorily without any kind of hierarchy imposing itself, and no kind of corporatism imposing itself. And Polinick is talking about how that's kind of been lost from Burning Man and from a lot of those things. And he says that really what you need to do is constantly be reinventing things like that. I mean, when they colonize one of your subcultural or countercultural institutions, create another one. Even before they colonize it, continue to create spaces that are free of hierarchy and dogma and ideology and corporatism. Just constantly be creating new spaces to share free ideas all the time. Because that's the only way that things don't become static.
And I think too, when you look at what a Burning Man or a Bonnaroo or Lollapalooza to a degree, I mean, Lollapalooza, you don't camp out there, but a lot of these festivals have the group of people who come there to get fucked up, for lack of a better term. And that takes away from the experience, because when you have these people who are unable to control themselves, they become a detriment to the experience itself, and they impede on other people's experience. And a lot of these events are meant to be think tanks. They're meant to be alternative ideas. They're meant to be this alternative lifestyle. And when you have these people coming in and doing these drugs and unable to control themselves, it sheds a bad light on the people who are at these events, who are truly trying to do positives for society and to try and bring forth positive ideas and what have you. And I think that is something that I don't know how it can be addressed. I don't know how you can have an experience or a festival or whatever that is free of people who are just incapable of controlling themselves. And I don't know if that speaks to society, where these events are deemed by people in society as being an escape. But even if it is an escape, you still have to be in control of yourself. Society plays such a large role of controlling the individual to adhering to a communal and societal sense. But inside of these events, it allows for the individual to be the individual. But if you're losing control, if you're allowing yourself to go too far, I believe that you're losing the overall meaning of these events, and you're losing the overall experience of these events by allowing yourself to become incapacitated to some degree through the drugs and whatever it is that you're doing. I think there needs to be a balance, but I also believe that because of the constraints of society, that it creates a lot of these windows of opportunity for people to lose control, not in a good sense, but in this sense of abusing drugs and what have you.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be, like Chuck Poloniak was saying, there definitely seems to be an element of novelty with these festivals, that a lot of times, like the first couple years they happen, there's like this sort of spontaneous magic that occurs with it. But then over time, it sort of falls into the same ruts and same habits, and it's like the best remedy for that, to escape that sort of cultural dominator culture inertia, is just to push the envelope even further and either go elsewhere and create another event, or to creatively modify that current one. But I think it is a constant struggle to sort of push the artistic boundary beyond the threshold when the dominator culture starts to leak in. But that looks like that's a wrap as far as time goes. Did you guys have anything else to say, or?
I mean, I really think gonna have fun?
It's 10:02.
Yeah, that seems short.
I mean, we got a pretty decent amount of
I think we did. I mean, we got a bunch of good stuff in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got a ton.
I mean, it definitely that